But for those of you who don't know or who have forgotten, I'm François Vigneault, and this is the book that I did. It was called Titan. As Michael said, it came out in 2017 in French first. I wrote it in English. I am Anglophone, despite my very Québécois name. I wrote it in English, was translated into French by Alexandre Fontaine-Rousseau, published in 2017 by Édition Papao here in Montréal. And then it was just published late last year by Oni Press in the United States. So this is the cover from the US edition. As you can see here, hopefully like any good cover, this sort of encapsulates some of the details and the ideas that are going into the book. And my book is a science fiction book, and it is about two people from literally two different worlds. And you can see them both here. João da Silva is the Terran man in the front, and Phoebe McIntosh is the Titan woman in the back. My comic takes place in about 200 years in the future, where the workers of Titan are literally genetically modified to be able to work in the harsh conditions of that moon. And there is a lot of tension between them and their management. And one of the main characters is João da Silva. He is a Terran manager from the Earth who has been sent to the Homestead Station on the moon of Titan to see if he can improve the productivity of it's basically like a mine, like a petroleum mine sort of thing. And he's there to see if he can improve the productivity on the moon. And it's a science fiction story, so we have fly in, and there's Saturn. Saturn's very picturesque and wonderful for science fiction. You can always include it in the background. Titan is an interesting place in real life. It literally rains methane. Methane is in liquid form, and there are these giant lakes of methane on the moon of Titan. Titan is probably one of the places that's most likely to have life in all of the solar system other than the Earth, even more likely than, for instance, Mars. But we don't really get into that at all in Titan. Titan is really a story about humans, and who have been transformed. So there are the humans from the Earth who are like you and I. They're about to, they're at of average height. And then there are the people from Titan who are called Titans, and they are much larger. They live in a low gravity system. And Titan is what I would refer to as sort of a semi-hard science fiction story. There's hard science fiction where the authors are very concerned with, for instance, like exactly how much fuel you need to do the low gravity maneuvers that you're going to be doing to get around from Mars to Jupiter or something like that. There is soft science fiction, which the ultimate example would be something like Star Wars, where there is really no rules as to what can and cannot happen. And then I would place myself somewhere in the middle, but closer to something that is hard science fiction, so closer to something like The Expanse than something like Star Trek or even Star Wars. And I tried to connect with that because I personally find myself interested in that that sort of story because I feel like it connects a little bit more with our real world. It's not a fantasy story. Yeah, I like fantasy stories as well, but for more and more as I get a little bit older, I find myself more interested in stories that are somewhere connected with our real world and real world concerns. And definitely Titan is concerned with that. The other main character is Phoebe. Phoebe is a Titan, so she is quite tall. She is 8 feet 3 inches tall, if I remember correctly from my notes that I made a long time ago. And like all the Titans, she is a worker. So she is a worker in this mining colony. The Titans are so large that they cannot actually go to the Earth. They cannot be on the gravity of the Earth without dying. They have been born and bred into definitely a second class citizenry. They are definitely like in a caste system. I don't know if you would go so far as to say it's a slave system, but it is definitely has been structured in such a way that they have very little power over their lives, and they are very much controlled by the people from the Earth, the Terrans. tried to spend a good amount of time. It's a short, it's a 200-page comic, which is a good size, but in many ways you just don't have very much time to get into all of the details and all of the world building. But I tried to always suggest a little bit about the world, like the big world that the Titans are living in. And so I tried to include little scenes of, their social interactions, what everyday life was like for these people, the good and the bad. And there are a lot of tensions in the world of Homestead Station, which are very much a reflection of tensions in the real world, tensions with racial tensions, class tensions, worker uprisings, and things like that. There are also other connections with the real world. I know that several students asked about the use of music in the book, and the book has quite a few real world songs, and music serves as a sort of uniting theme that unites the characters. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A. But one thing I will mention just off the bat that I like about music and culture is that it creates a link with our world. Like, the characters in this comic that are set 200 years in the future, they're listening to and connecting with music that is from our past or our present. And I think that that's quite interesting because it allows us as readers to have a connection with the characters. It's a little bit different than, say, for instance, in something like the aforementioned Star Wars, where it is in a galaxy far, far away in a time long, long ago. I said that backwards. And in that way, I like that little bit of a connection from the real world, and you can kind of imagine into the future. Our present is the past and the future. There are a lot of, I also tried to connect Titan with various real world social movements. And I wrote Titan over the course of maybe 5 years, and I started writing it back in 2012. So it definitely was not meant to be, it's not meant to be a comment on things that are currently happening in our world. But I will say that when the English edition came out in 2020, it felt very present, right? I am, as Michael mentioned, I'm from the United States, and it was very troubling to me to have so many connections with what I was doing in my work, which had originally been published in full book form in 2017, have so much reflection in what was going on in 2020. It was quite disturbing, in fact. And so I tried to connect quite a bit with that. And that included everything from, police violence to worker uprisings throughout history. For instance, the place that they are living in on Titan is called Homestead Station. That's named after the Homestead Strike, and later on the Homestead Massacre, which was a very bloody confrontation between. Just want to make sure I'm just going to pull back my. A very bloody confrontation between striking workers and the private detectives who were called in to break the strike. And it ended with many, many dozens of people dying. And so Homestead Station is a reference to that. And there are many other, connective tissues with other social movements in our time. Everything from the Arab Spring to the Green Revolution to even though it was happening largely after I wrote the book, like many of the protests and actions that are happening in the United States and all around the world in the last few years as well. And I don't, because of the limitations of the scope of the book, I didn't get to spend as much time as I'd like in some ways connecting with everyday life. With there's not a huge cast of characters in the book, but I did try, and for me, it's very important that it's connected with real life and real people. There are heroes in my book, but I did try and connect it with the realities of people on both sides of this conflict, people, both the Terrans and the Titans, both the workers and the management, the workers and the security forces, and the different ways that all of their lives are intersecting. I really wanted it to be a sort of a story about time of war, a time of conflict, but the real people and how they're interacting with each other during that. And some of those people react differently than others. You know, everyone in the book is their own hero of their own story. I think that that's quite interesting. I personally am very much a believer in that everyone thinks that they are the hero of their own story, that they're doing they're doing the best thing for themselves, for their family, for their loved ones. And I like that blurriness, that more of a shades of gray. I'm definitely not a Manichaean. I don't believe in like a battle of good versus evil. I really believe in different people with different self-interests struggling and trying to work things out. And then hopefully, as those of you who have read the book will see, even though that struggle is very difficult, sometimes I do think that there is some hope for reconciliation, some hope for connection between people.